0612 local time, Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC fastboat crew is running northeast at 40 knots, tucked between two civilian tankers, weapons mounts loaded, comms quiet. They believe nothing at the carrier's altitude can engage them through this clutter. They are correct about the F-35C. They are wrong about what is actually overhead. 500 feet above the water, slow, deliberate watching them, is the weapon they were not told to look for. That weapon is not new. It is not stealth. It is not classified. It first flew in 1986. The U.S. Army has been operating it for almost 40 years. Yet on March 19, 2026, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs walked to the Pentagon podium and confirmed it is now hunting Iranian fast boats and one-way attack drones in the most contested waterway on the planet. Alongside another aircraft, the Air Force has been trying to retire for a decade. Because between the F-35C at 30,000 feet and the IRGC speedboat at sea level, there is a 21-mile gap the fighter jet cannot reach. And something has to fly into it. That something is the AH-64 Apache. And what it is doing in the Strait of Hormuz is the reason Iran's last working naval play is collapsing, one boat at a time. The gap the F-35 cannot fill. To understand why the world's most advanced fighter aircraft is the wrong weapon for this fight, look at the geometry of the water Iran chose to defend. 21 miles wide at the narrowest point, two shipping lanes, one inbound, one outbound, separated by a 2-mile buffer. Tankers transit nose to tail, container ships, dhows, fishing boats, ferries, naval auxiliaries, all moving through the same compressed channel. 20% of the world's seaborne oil every day. This is the kill zone Iran built its fast boat doctrine around. The IRGC Navy operates a fleet of Pekayap-class fast attack craft, 29 meters long, top speed of 50 knots, armed with rocket pods, heavy machine guns, and on the larger variants, anti-ship missiles. They are not battleships. They are not designed to fight a destroyer in open water. They are designed for exactly one thing: closing the distance to a commercial vessel inside the chokepoint before any aircraft at altitude can do anything about it. The boat is small. The boat is fast. The boat does not show up on radar the same way an aircraft does. The boat hides behind tankers, parallels civilian traffic, switches hulls in port, and emerges from inlets along the Iranian coast at the time and place of the captain's choosing. The IRGC has been refining this doctrine since the 1980s tanker war. In 1988, a single Iranian mine nearly sank the USS Samuel B. Roberts in this same waterway and forced the largest U.S. Navy surface engagement since World War II, Operation Praying Mantis. The lesson Tehran took from that engagement was not to build a bigger fleet, it was to build a smaller one. Distributed, cheap, survivable, hundreds of boats instead of dozens of frigates. A force that could not be sunk because there was no center of mass to sink. After Operation Epic Fury eliminated the IRGC's conventional surface fleet in 3 weeks, the fast boat force is what is left. And the fast boat force is the part Iran always considered the real weapon. Open source defense estimates put the IRGC Navy fast boat inventory at over 100 operational hulls before Epic Fury. That number has been reduced, but not eliminated. Boats can be rebuilt in any commercial boatyard along the Iranian coast in weeks. Crews can be trained in months. The hardware is fiberglass, outboard engines, and welded weapon mounts. None of it is hard to replace. The institutional knowledge of how to use it that took 30 years to build, and that is what survived. Now put the F-35C Lightning II into that picture. The F-35C is the most advanced carrier-based aircraft ever fielded. Stealth, sensor fusion, networked targeting, penetration capability that no fourth-generation fighter approaches. At 30,000 feet over the Persian Gulf, an F-35C sees everything. It tracks, it classifies, it builds the picture nothing else in the inventory can build. But it cannot strafe a speedboat. It does not carry a gun designed for that engagement. Its weapons load, air-to-air missiles, precision-guided bombs, anti-radiation munitions, is built for fixed targets, large vessels, and other aircraft. The smallest precision-guided weapon in its bay still costs more than the boat. And the engagement geometry is wrong. A fighter doing 500 knots closing on a 30-foot boat doing 40 knots gets a fraction of a second targeting window through a forest of civilian traffic where the cost of a mistake is a sunken neutral tanker and an international incident. That is the gap. 21 miles wide, sea level to about 2,000 feet, cluttered with neutral shipping, filled with small, fast targets that have to be visually identified before they can be lawfully engaged. The F-35C is not the weapon for that gap. The destroyer screen reaches into it but cannot loiter at low altitude. The MQ-9 overhead provides eyes, but cannot deliver the volume of fire a swarm requires. Something has to fly into that gap and stay there. The Apache reveal. The aircraft that flew into it took off from a forward base in the Gulf region in the second half of 2025. Tail markings traced by defense publications back to the 6th to 17th Air Cavalry Squadron, 4th Infantry Division Combat Aviation Brigade, AH-64D version 14 airframes, originally pushed into the region under Operation Inherent Resolve, quietly redirected to the Strait mission as Operation Epic Fury widened. This is what they brought. The AH-64 Apache cruises at 170 miles per hour. It can hold low-altitude station for over 2 hours on internal fuel. Service ceiling is north of 20,000 feet, but that is not where it works. It works at 500 feet, sometimes lower, slow enough for the gunner in the front seat to pick a fast boat out of a tanker queue with a Mark I eyeball, fast enough to close the gap before the boat reaches the merchant hull. That is the speed envelope no jet can match. On the nose, the M230 chain gun, 30mm, 625 rounds per minute, slaved to the gunner's helmet sight. Wherever the gunner looks, the gun points. A 2-second burst is enough rounds to take a PK-AP engine clean out of the water. Under the stub wings, up to 16 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, laser-guided, 10-kilometer range, built originally to kill Soviet tanks, now killing fast attack craft and one-way drones with the same hardware. Pair them with Hydra 70 unguided rocket pods for area suppression, and the Apache covers the entire engagement spectrum from a single pylon load. Above the rotor mast, the AN/APG-78 longbow radar, millimeter wave, fire control. The longbow can rapidly classify and prioritize large numbers of contacts simultaneously. In the cluttered, close-quarters maritime environment of the Strait, that is the function that matters. It separates the IRGC fastboat from the dhow next to it. It sorts the threat from the neutral. It hands the gunner a target list ranked by priority before the gunner has to think about it. An F-35C at 30,000 feet sees a radar return. The Apache crew at 500 feet sees the boat, sees the rocket pods on the deck, sees the men on the rails, and makes the call before the trigger comes back. The mast-mounted position of the longbow is what makes the rest of it possible. Because the radar sits above the rotor disc, the Apache can hover behind a ridgeline or a coastal outcrop with only the radar dome exposed, building a complete tactical picture of every contact in the channel without exposing the airframe to return fire from the boats below. It can lace a target, hand it off to a wingman, and never break the terrain mask. No fixed-wing aircraft on the planet can do that. The ability to look without being seen in the same airspace as the threat is the single capability the Strait demands and the F-35C cannot offer. That is layer 1 of why the Apache is in the Strait. Layer 2 is the drone problem. Iran's swarm tactic depends on saturation. Launch enough Shahed 136 low and slow in waves from coastal sites and support vessels, and eventually one gets through to a destroyer or a tanker. 40 kilograms of warhead on a $20,000 airframe. Send 100, lose 90. The math still works in Iran's favor if the engagement geometry holds. The Apache breaks that math. A Shahed 136 cruises at about 115 miles per hour. A fighter doing 500 knots closing on it gets a firing window of fractions of a second and burns far more in fuel and missiles than the drone is worth. An Apache matching the drone's altitude and speed has all the time in the world. The longbow tracks it. The chain gun finishes it. Or a single Hellfire, overkill but available and cheaper than the destroyer it might have hit. In pre-deployment exercises in November 2025, the AH-64 system scored 13 drone kills in 14 shots. That number was the confirmation the platform was ready. 4 months later, it was over the Strait of Hormuz, doing it for real. There is one more thing about the Apache that matters in this specific environment. The airframe is built to absorb hits. The cockpit tub is armored against 23mm rounds, the heaviest weapon Iran's fast boats carry. The rotor blades will fly with significant battle damage. The transmission will run dry of oil for 30 minutes. The fuel cells are self-sealing. Hydraulic systems are redundant on multiple paths. A fast boat machine gunner on a PKAP deck can put rounds on an Apache, and the Apache can absorb them and keep engaging. That asymmetry, that the helicopter can take the hit the boat cannot, is what makes the persistent low-altitude posture possible. It is not a stealth platform. It is a platform that does not need stealth at this altitude because it can survive being seen. The Pentagon confirmation. For weeks, the Apache presence in the Strait was unconfirmed. CENTCOM aircraft listings in mid-March began including AH-64s in Operation Epic Fury daily updates. Quiet, procedural, no public statement. Then on March 19, 2026, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs ended the ambiguity. General Dan Kane, Pentagon press briefing room. The A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is hunting and killing fast attack watercraft in the Straits of Hormuz. Then the second sentence. AH-64 Apache gunships are also hunting one-way attack drones in the same area. 2 sentences, 2 platform names, 1 operational picture. The A-10 takes the surface threat with the GAU-8 cannon, 3,900 rounds per minute through a fast attack hull. The Apache takes the airborne threat. Drones and slow movers in the low altitude band the destroyers cannot reach. They work the same southern flank, same airspace, different layers of the same problem. The F-35C is not in either sentence because the F-35C is not doing this job. Kane did not name the unit. He did not give a rules of engagement boundary. He did not say how many airframes were in theater. The 2 sentences above were the entire Apache disclosure for that briefing. Everything else came from photographs, defense reporting, and the visible aircraft markings on the airframes that started showing up in CENTCOM imagery the same week. The 6th to 17th Air Cavalry Squadron's call signs traced through commercial flight tracking for a brief window back to a Gulf region base. Then those tracks went dark. Standard operational security. Once a unit identifier is public, it stops broadcasting. 29 days later, on April 17, 2026, U.S. Central Command released photographs. U.S. Army AH-64 Apaches on patrol directly over the Strait of Hormuz. Coastal terrain visible in the background, water below. The release was deliberate. The timing was deliberate. The message was the message. Iran answered the next morning, April 18, 2026, 20 nautical miles off the coast of Oman. The VLCC Sanmar Herald, Indian-flagged, fully laden, is transiting the outbound shipping lane. The vessel had received prior Iranian clearance. It had transmitted its identity. It was where it was supposed to be, doing what it was supposed to do. 2 IRGC gunboats opened fire on it without a radio warning. UKMTO, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center that coordinates merchant traffic in the region, confirmed the attack within hours. Bridge windows took small arms damage. No casualties were reported. The boats fired, broke off, and disappeared back into the inshore traffic pattern before any large platform could close the distance. War risk insurance premiums for vessels transiting the strait moved on the same news cycle. Underwriters in London do not need a sunken hull to reprice. They need uncertainty about whether the next hull goes through unchallenged. The Sanmar Herald incident delivered exactly that uncertainty. The Apache patrol that CENTCOM photographed less than 24 hours earlier did not stop the attack. That is the question this video has not answered yet. Apaches were in the airspace. The April 17th imagery proved it. The IRGC fast boat commander on April 18th either did not believe the patrol would engage him before he opened fire, or he calculated correctly that under the current rules of engagement, it would not. This is the unresolved problem at the center of the Apache deployment. Persistent low-altitude patrol presence is designed specifically to close the response time window between an Iranian boat raising its weapons and the U.S. engaging it. But the rules of engagement that authorize preemptive strike on a fast boat before it fires are not the same as the rules that authorize engagement after a tanker has already taken hits. CENTCOM has not made the trigger threshold public. Iran is testing it. The Apache crew over the strait on April 18th saw what happened. The crew documented it in real time. Boat type, speed, heading, armament. The intelligence picture from that engagement is now in the planning cycle for every Apache flight that follows. The next IRGC commander to raise his weapons will be deciding whether the threshold has changed. The cost and the close. There is a problem with the aircraft doing this job. The Apache is a 1986 vintage platform. The Army is not retiring the AH-64. The airframe has another decade of programmed service life, but the broader picture around it is harder. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the second aircraft in General Kane's March 19th statement, is officially scheduled for full retirement by 2027. Air Force budget documents call for the entire 145 in aircraft fleet phased out within 18 months of this recording. Congress has blocked the retirement once. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026 mandated a minimum inventory of 103 A-10 airframes through September 2026. The Air Force was legally prevented from divesting the aircraft the same year it was sent to war over the strait. That is the political problem. Here's the operational one. If the A-10 retires on schedule, the surface threat layer over the strait, the part the Apache is not optimized for, the speedboats that need a 30mm cannon at low altitude with 30 minutes of loiter, has no clear successor. The F-35 is not built for this. The drone systems being developed are not there yet. The Apache can engage a fast boat with Hellfire, but the cost per engagement and the magazine depth do not match what the GAU-8 cannon delivers in one pass. The closest planned replacement, the OA-1K Skywarden, a turboprop light attack aircraft built around the same close air support mission profile, is years from operational deployment in this theater. The first squadron is still standing up. Even on the most optimistic timeline, the aircraft will not be flying combat patrols over the strait in the window currently being defended by the A-10. Take away the A-10 and the Apache is doing two jobs alone. The combat performance of both platforms in Operation Epic Fury is now the most concrete operational argument against retirement. Every Apache patrol over the strait is a data point. Every A-10 strike on a pay cap is a data point. Every drone the Apache kills is a data point. These data points are landing in the FY 2027 budget cycle now being written. Iran's surviving naval doctrine is built around the assumption that the United States cannot keep low, slow, persistent armed presence over the strait indefinitely, because the platforms that do that job are old, and the US has been signaling for years that it intends to retire them. That assumption is being tested in real time. The Apache crew flying the April 17th patrol over the strait took off from a base in the Gulf region. They flew at 500 feet over the most heavily mined waterway in the world, above the same gunboats that fired on a tanker the next morning. They could see the Iranian fast boats below them. The boats could see them too. Whether the next engagement begins before or after the IRGC opens fire is the only question that matters now. Everything else, the budget cycle, the retirement schedule, the platform comparisons, runs downstream of that single trigger decision. The F-35s fights at 30,000 feet. The Iranian fast boats fight at sea level. The weapon that works is the one that flies between them. The Apache is now that weapon. It is over the strait right now.